And now British Prime Minister Theresa May says the UK cabinet has supported her Brexit plan. Here she is.
I firmly believe that the draft withdrawal agreement was the best that could be negotiated, and it was for the cabinet to decide whether to move on in the talks. The choices before us were difficult, particularly in relation to the Northern Ireland backstop. But the collective decision of cabinet was that the government should agree the draft withdrawal agreement and the outline political declaration. This is a decisive step.
May added the proposed deal is in the national interest of the UK. The British Premier, however, said there will be difficult days ahead. She said the divorce deal enables Britain to take back control over the fate of its citizens and build a brighter future. Meanwhile, the European Union chief Brexit negotiator has delivered a statement after May's cabinet meeting. Michel Barnier described the agreement as a decisive step for Brexit.
This agreement is decisive, a crucial step in concluding these negotiations.
Barnier said Northern Ireland will stay in the same customs territory as the rest of the United Kingdom, but that the region will remain aligned to some EU regulations to avoid a hard border. He also underlined the transition period can be extended for a limited time. EU officials said that much work remains to be done and that the road to get an orderly Brexit is still long and may be difficult. Now, Barnier is to meet European Council President Donald Tusk on Thursday to discuss the details of the Brexit deal. Now joining us out of Bristol is Tony Gosling, investigative journalist. Hello, Tony. It's a pleasure to have you back on the program. And now, I mean, a lot of people see this as not the beginning of the end, but perhaps the middle of the end for Theresa May. A lot of her ministers were totally against. They're irate, not to mention the ones, Boris Johnson, his kid brother Joe, David Davis. A lot of people bailed on her. A lot of people that initiated this thing to begin with didn't believe in where she's taking it. A lot of people now don't believe it. And a lot of people don't think it's going to get past Parliament. Rough days ahead for her and her Brexit plan. Your thoughts, please.
Well, it's as if Theresa May hasn't done the maths. She needs 320 members of Parliament to back her deal in order to get it through the House of Commons. And at the moment, she's 120 MPs or so short of that. I mean, she really needed to have a deal which she can persuade her own Conservative Party, plus the Democratic Unionists in Ireland, to vote for in order to stand a chance of getting it through. And she's not really doing that. By staying in the customs union for an extended transition period, what that means is that Britain cannot do any other deals with other parts of the world. So effectively, as regards goods and services, we're staying in the European Union. Now, that's not what we were promised, of course, is it? And it's not what people voted for. One thing I'd say is if we do not leave the European Union, I have serious doubts about social unrest possibly here in the United Kingdom. It's not something we've seen for a long time. But it's quite clear that that's what people have voted for, and it doesn't look as if Theresa May is going to hand it to this country, and she's not going to be able to get it passed. So maybe this is almost like a sabotage deal. With the Northern Ireland border, it's quite obvious to anybody with half a brain, if you're going to leave with Northern Ireland and Britain and Scotland and Wales all leaving, then you're going to have a hard border between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland, because Southern Ireland is going to be still in the European Union. Now, I used to live over there back in the 1990s, and it was a very strong border because the Northern Ireland Troubles were on. Actually, all you need is an ordinary, normal border, and there's no reason why Theresa May should have gambled this away. So this United States of Europe is slowly crumbling. I just hope that the British politicians have got the mettle to be the first country to say no to the unelected leaders of the EU. And we're going to have a new European president next year. No European individual voter is going to have a chance to vote on who that's going to be. And this is not the sort of organisation, 800 million people. We want to decide who's going to run Europe, and they're not letting us. And until they do, I'm afraid Britain we are going to leave. But there'll be other countries too. The Italians as well are very much trying to get to leave the Union, there and other countries will follow. So it's taken 2.5 years to get to this point, but it seems to me that the deal that Theresa May has put before her cabinet, which they've been strong-armed into, by the way, no votes have been allowed in the cabinet over this. There's a consensus with the Prime Minister really strong-arming people into supporting her. The fact is also that she has not published this deal here in Britain. It's the European Union, the European Commission, that put it on the internet, so we now know what this deal is. But if she'd had her way, nobody in Britain would have even known what the deal was. So I think really she's, sabotaging her own premiership by trying to force through a deal, force through a long transition period too, to stay in the EU, which I don't think her own party is going to support ultimately.
And okay, so ultimately, if her own party doesn't support it, or even if it does, it gets to Parliament, and we see Labour and make a strong case to shoot it down in Parliament, and then you still have the European side. You got to see how European ministers deal with the Brexit on their end. Ultimately, if it crashes, and we see a general snap elections, we see a new leader for the Tories. What do you see? What kind of Brexit proposal do you see from the Leave camp, perhaps from the Tories or even from Labour, that will suffice, that will be happy, that will that will get through Parliament over there in the UK? Do you see Theresa May being at the helm of that deal, the ultimate Brexit deal, the final Brexit deal?
No, I think there are several other. I probably, I hate to say it, but somebody like Boris Johnson, who, by the way, has been told even when he was at Eton and at University in Oxford that he was going to be Prime Minister one day. He was in the Bullingdon Club, which is this little cult where they tell you, and David Cameron was in it and various others as well, that you're going to be Prime Minister one day. So somebody like him may well take over with a more confident actual withdrawal from the EU with some sort of deal. What we really need is something like this Canada deal, or possibly something a bit closer to a Norway deal. But staying in the customs union is just not going to be acceptable, I think, to those that actually voted to leave, because what it does is it still leaves the European Court of Justice in having say over British businesses and what they are and are not allowed to do. And of course that isn't actually leaving the European Union if we're still under their legal jurisdiction. So there is Theresa May, I think, is going to be toast rather soon. We might well see another leader of the Conservative Party emerge. But you have to remember, Theresa May was not elected to be the leader of the Conservative. The only person that stood against her after Cameron left and after the Brexit vote was Andrea Leadsom. And Andrea Leadsom just gave up. She fell on her sword just before the election date. So Theresa May got a bye. And she's been very autocratic as a leader. I think she's the favoured leader, really, of the civil service and the secret services. And so that's why she's not being allowed any votes in cabinet, because she likes to get her way, even if it is at the jeopardy of her own country. And I think if there's a new Conservative leader and a new Prime Minister, what we might see is less autocracy and more discussion, honest voting, and then coming to a consensus after that, with the cabinet not in the future being told what to think.
Always a pleasure, and to get your perspective on the program, Tony Gosling, everyone joining us out of Bristol, investigative journalist.